I'm not who you think I am. My name's Jason Ryder. I'm 42. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac outside of Washington, D.C. If you were my neighbor, you'd probably say I'm the security guy, the one who drives the black Yukon and always waves from the mailbox. My wife, Mallory, hosts book club twice a month, and our Labrador, Rex, barks at squirrels but not at children. It's a peaceful life. At least, that's how it looks. The truth is, I used to disappear. Not in the way middle-aged men talk about disappearing into golf or bourbon or the garage. I used to really disappear. No passport stamps, no return tickets. I went where I was told. I did what others couldn't. Then one day, I walked away from it all. I thought I buried that version of myself. But there are things you never unlearn, like how to watch someone without them knowing, how to spot a lie in a blink, how to smell danger in a smile. And lately, my wife's been smiling a lot more than usual, but not at me. It started small. Her phone face down at dinner, the way she flinched when I walked into the room too quietly. New dresses, new perfume, and a sudden obsession with keeping her calendar private. She said she was working late on a case. She kissed me with just her lips. No weight, no warmth. Most people would call it paranoia. But paranoia is for people who guess. I don't guess. I observe, I confirm. I prepare. One Thursday evening, I told her I had a client meeting in Georgetown. I didn't. I parked 2 blocks from the office building she said she'd be in and waited. Watched. Tracked. 3 hours later, she emerged, but not alone. He was tall, sharp-suited, confident in that way lawyers always are when they think the world bends to them. He opened the door for her like they'd done this dance 100 times. They didn't kiss. Too smart for that, but her body language told me everything. His name is Robert Cassidy, partner at a boutique firm with powerful friends and few morals. Aggressive litigator, ambitious. Divorced twice. He doesn't like to lose. Neither do I. At first, I wanted to confront her, but I knew better. This wasn't just an affair. It was cleaner than that. Clinical, calculated. She was working a long play, something more than sex. I dug deeper, quietly, thoroughly. I found encrypted email threads, a second phone, a burner account in the Caymans. And then I found the real kicker, a draft divorce petition, already pre-signed by her, with a timeline that coincided perfectly with Cassidy's upcoming case before a certain Judge Donald Graves, a man whose name had been whispered around D.C. circles for years. Now I knew this wasn't just betrayal. It was a coup, a hostile takeover of my life. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to ruin me. Take the house. Bleed the accounts. Sabotage my business. And with the help of a friendly judge, they could do it all by the book. I don't remember exactly when the switch flipped. Maybe it was the moment I read the clause in her draft about irreconcilable emotional neglect. Maybe it was the private message Cassidy sent to the judge about how the idiot husband won't see it coming. But I do remember how quiet it was in my office. Just the hum of the desktop tower, the soft tick of the watch on my wrist. And for the first time in years, I felt awake. They thought I was a suburban fool who once had a cool job. They had no idea who I used to be, what I used to do, and more importantly, what I'm still capable of. The thing about men like me is, we don't scream, we don't plead, we observe, we calculate, and then we act. I didn't need revenge. I needed leverage. So I began to build it. The cameras went up, the software was deployed, accounts were tapped, files mirrored, routines mapped. I built a digital shadow of their lives before they even realized the lights were on. And while they were sleeping beside each other, dreaming of courtrooms and asset seizures, I was laying traps in every system they touched. I saw the judge's debts, Cassidy's offshore contacts, a list of other favored outcomes they'd pulled off together. Mallory thought I was too sentimental to suspect her, that I'd roll over, that I'd sign away my dignity. But she forgot who taught her how to lie convincingly at a dinner party. She forgot who installed the alarm system. She forgot what I used to be, and still am when necessary. I watched from the shadows and waited for the moment they'd feel invincible. Because that's when people make mistakes. And Jason Ryder, I don't miss. Most people, when betrayed, spiral inward. They drink, they yell, they beg. I made a list: Cassidy, Mallory, Judge Graves. Their names sat at the top like targets I wasn't yet ready to pull the trigger on. Below them, bank accounts, passwords, habits, weaknesses. I wasn't building a case. I was constructing a kill box. Quiet, precise. No one ever suspects the man smiling at the grill while everything around them is catching fire. But this wasn't a job for one man. Not anymore. The kind of war they'd declared needed a different kind of response. So I made another list. People I once swore I'd never call again. The first name was Mark Lawson. I found him where I knew he'd be, off the grid in a cabin 3 hours outside Roanoke, splitting logs and living like no one had ever taught him how to use a cell phone. He opened the door with a shotgun in one hand and a bottle of bourbon in the other. Told myself if I ever saw you again it'd be because someone died. Not yet, I said, but we're getting close. He let me in without another word. We didn't talk about the last job, or the blood, or the way everything had gone sideways in Cairo. We didn't have to. I handed him a thin file: photos, bank records, burner messages. He didn't ask if they were guilty. He just nodded. All right, he said. Who else? Next was Lexi Chu, tech wizard, data manipulator. Once hacked into a NATO server because someone told her she couldn't. The last I heard, she was running an underground tech clinic in Chicago for kids trying to disappear from the grid. I tracked her through a black market server disguised as a Korean skincare website. She agreed to meet in a ramen shop behind an unmarked laundromat. You know, I'm on the watch list again, right? She said, sliding into the booth without making eye contact. I need something erased, I replied. She raised an eyebrow. What? Me. She sipped her tea. I'll need 2 days, and root access to all your devices. You'll get it, I said. And more. She didn't ask for money. She never did. With Lexi, it was always about the puzzle, the risk, the thrill of untangling knots no one else could even see. By the time I flew back to D.C., we were 3. Soon to be 4. Elliot Blaine was the hardest to find. Last I'd heard, he was managing hedge funds under an alias, laundering money for people whose names never showed up on government records. I sent one message through a private banking protocol in Zurich. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering vengeance. He answered with coordinates. He always loved the dramatic touch. We met in a glass penthouse overlooking the Hudson. Elliot looked softer than I remembered, gray at the temples, linen suit, expensive watch, but his eyes were just as cold. They took something from you, he asked. They're trying. Then let's take something back. Just like that, the team was complete. What none of them asked, but all of them were thinking, was why now? Why, after all these years, would I dig up ghosts and call in favors I'd buried in concrete? What had driven Jason Ryder back into the shadows? I didn't give them an answer. Instead, I gave them assignments. Mark started tailing Cassidy, tracking his meetings, his body language, noting who he feared, who he bowed to. He found out Cassidy was bleeding money into a side project involving a real estate scam tied to city contracts, and he wasn't doing it alone. Lexi hacked Graves' private network through a smart coffee maker in his vacation home. Within hours, she had his calendar, wire transfers, and encrypted chats with a half-dozen suspicious names, one of which, oddly enough, matched the alias of a former cartel accountant. Curious, Elliot traced the financial strings, offshore accounts. Shell companies. Hidden investments tied to both Cassidy and Graves, all funneling through a bank in Luxembourg. The judge wasn't just corrupt, he was in deep with someone far bigger than I'd expected. I watched it all unfold like a conductor listening to his orchestra. But the truth? I wasn't sleeping. Not really. I kept hearing her voice in my head. The way she laughed with him, the way she lied to me with a straight face. I wanted to feel hatred. I wanted to burn her name out of my memory. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because there was one thing still missing. Her motive. Why? Why risk it all? Why him? Why now? She already had the life she said she wanted. A good house, a stable husband, no danger, no secrets. Unless that was the problem. Unless safety had become boring, and betrayal tasted better than loyalty. But even that didn't sit right. Something else was going on. Something she hadn't told him. Something she hadn't told anyone. And the deeper I dug, the stranger it got. There were calls made from her phone to a blocked number every Wednesday for the past 8 months, always at the same time, always just under 3 minutes. The number didn't trace. Not normally, but Lexi cracked it. It rang back to a secured line once registered to a private intelligence firm in Langley. One that had been disbanded 5 years ago after an internal leak destroyed half their operatives. I knew the name because I used to work with them. That's when the chill hit me. What if Mallory's betrayal wasn't just personal? What if she wasn't doing this for herself? What if someone sent her to destroy me, from the inside? The game had just changed, and I'd been playing defense for too long. It was time to go on the attack. It started with a name I wasn't supposed to see. Odin Protocol. Lexi found it buried inside the metadata of a scrubbed message sent from Mallory's phone, a ghost reference. Not written, not spoken, just embedded, like a fingerprint someone forgot to wipe clean. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, but we weren't most people. The Odin Protocol wasn't a thing you Googled. It wasn't a file or a directive or even a mission. It was a whisper. Something from deep inside the intelligence world that was never meant to exist in writing. Years ago, I'd heard about it while stationed in Tallinn, when one of our own was found face down in a frozen river with no wounds and no explanation. A cleaner had said just 2 words before vanishing off the grid. Odin Protocol. Back then, it had been background noise. Now, it was under my roof. Something wasn't right. Mallory and Cassidy weren't smart enough to cover their tracks this well on their own. Their plan was solid, sure, but the precision of it, the timing, the financial structure, it all felt like someone else's fingerprints were all over it. Someone experienced. Someone trained. That meant one thing. This wasn't just about love or money anymore. This was a sanctioned operation. But sanctioned by who? I couldn't afford to guess. So I shifted the mission. We moved fast. Lexi rerouted all of Cassidy's cloud backups through a false server we set up in Prague. Elliot staged a cyber error at one of Graves' shell banks that locked his assets just long enough to trigger a financial panic. Mark got close enough to plant a bug on Cassidy's watch during a downtown lunch meeting. I watched the feed live from my basement as Cassidy whispered into his whiskey. "Tell Mallory not to panic. We're still on schedule." Schedule for what? The next day, Cassidy was served with a federal subpoena. The day after that, Judge Graves' daughter's private school received an anonymous tip about an offshore trust being funneled through a scholarship fund. By day 4, Cassidy was calling Mallory every hour. I intercepted each call. Listened. Studied. Mallory's voice was different. Colder. Not scared. Controlled. Like a person following orders. And then she said something that nearly made me drop the receiver. "Jason won't be a problem. He never finishes what he starts." That was a lie, but not one she came up with on her own. It was bait. She knew I was listening. They wanted me rattled, off balance. But I'd spent a decade learning to keep my heartbeat steady while a man screamed in my ear with a gun pressed to my chest. Mallory's little performance didn't even register. Still, it meant they were watching me too. The following morning, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual envelope. Unmarked, no return address. Inside, a photo of me standing in my driveway, sipping coffee, taken from across the street. Below it, in thin black ink, "Stay out of this, you're not cleared." No signature, no fingerprint. But the message was clear. That's when I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit until now. They weren't just trying to ruin me. They were trying to erase me. Not physically, legally, financially, reputationally, like I never existed. And if they were doing it to me, how many others had they already done it to? Elliot pulled the financials from Graves' offshore web and found at least 7 names that showed the same pattern: unexplained asset transfers, sudden court rulings, vanishing bank accounts, all of them ex-military, ex-intelligence, all of them gone. I wasn't the first. I was just the next. We called in a favor from an old ghost in Langley, someone who owed me more than one. He refused to speak directly, but the message was delivered on a scrap of paper inside a used book. The Odin Protocol is active. Eyes high. Do not trust anyone in the chain, especially the ones who say they're clean. That night, I sat alone in the garage, staring at Mallory's car. I thought about the woman I'd married, the way she used to fall asleep against my chest, the way she cried the night her father died. I thought about the small things: her laugh, her handwriting, the scent of her shampoo. And I thought about how none of it had been real. Because somewhere along the way she'd stopped being my wife. She'd become my handler. The calls, the fake warmth, the redirection. It all made sense now. The relationship was a cover, a way to get close. To study me, to extract everything they needed: habits, safe houses, contingency protocols. It hadn't been a love story. It had been a long con. One that someone had started planning years ago. Which begged the question, why me? What did they think I still knew? What was I holding that they wanted so badly? And then it hit me. There was one file I had never turned in, one mission I had scrubbed from every system before I walked away. It had been my insurance, my one act of disobedience. The thing I promised I would never use, unless they came after me first. They had. So now I would. I opened the floor panel in the garage and pulled out a drive no one alive even knew existed. Inside it, names, locations, black-budget projects, offshore command nodes, every dirty secret I'd ever witnessed, every operation they'd begged me to forget. They wanted to erase me? Let them try. Because now the game had changed. They thought I was still just the husband. The liability. The man too sentimental to fight back. But they forgot something. I don't break. I vanish, and then I return stronger. They picked the wrong ghost to wake. The moment I plugged the drive in, the lights flickered, not because of a power surge, but because the system recognized what it was holding. It wasn't just data. It was leverage, ammunition, and every line of code on that drive carried blood. I hadn't looked at it in years. I told myself I never would, that I'd buried the man I was along with the things he did. But this wasn't revenge anymore. It was survival, and if they wanted to burn me, I'd make sure they burned first. I met Mark at an abandoned airstrip outside of Arlington. He was already scanning the perimeter before I stepped out of the car. "We doing this?" he asked. I handed him a small case. "Deliver it to the 3 outlets I circled. One goes dark, send to the next. Don't ask questions. Don't improvise." He nodded once. No hesitation. We didn't need a goodbye. Lexi had built a failsafe. If I didn't type in a specific password within 48 hours, the contents of the drive would go live. Uncensored, government back channels, political assassinations, covert biological programs. Everything. This wasn't a scalpel anymore. It was a bomb, and now I just had to walk into the blast radius. I sent Mallory a single message. I know everything. Meet me where it started. She showed up. Of course she did. Same coat, same perfume, but not the same woman. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. She stood across from me on the edge of the cliff near Blackwood Bay, where we'd once carved our initials into a pine tree before I shipped out to Poland. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. "You were never supposed to find out," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "That's what they always say." Her eyes didn't waver. It wasn't personal. That made me laugh, cold, deep, bitter. "You lived in my house. You kissed me goodnight. You called me your husband. How much more personal could it be?" "I didn't choose you." "Then who did?" She hesitated, just for a second. But I saw it. There was someone else. Someone higher. She wasn't the top of the food chain, just another handler, another pawn. "Cassidy?" I asked. "No, he was just leverage. You used him to make the story believable." She looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. So what was the mission? Just destroy me? Or did you need what I had? "We needed you to disappear. Quietly." "You should have asked. I'm good at that." "I know," she whispered. "That silence between us? It was years long. It carried every fake smile, every silent dinner, every night she curled up next to me while mapping out my destruction in her mind." "You loved me," I said. She didn't deny it. "I still do. But that doesn't matter anymore, does it?" I took a step forward. Slowly. Not threatening. Just final. "You remember what I told you on our wedding day?" I asked. "That if I ever lied to you, you'd know." "No," I said softly. "That if someone came for me, they'd have to finish the job." She looked up, really looked at me, and for the first time since this started, her face cracked. Not fear, not guilt, regret. "I tried to protect you," she said, at the end. But it was too late. I walked past her, left her standing at the cliff's edge, eyes full of things she could never say. That night, Graves was arrested by the FBI, not for the things we knew, but for the things we made sure they found. Cassidy resigned from his firm under scandal and left the country under sealed investigation. All their bridges were burned, every ally they had, gone. Every dollar, frozen. Their kingdom collapsed in silence. Mallory disappeared 3 days later. No word, no trace, not even Lexi could find her. Maybe she ran. Maybe she was erased by the same people who once gave her orders. Maybe she finally understood what it meant to live in the shadows. I didn't chase her. I had work to do. Somewhere in a forgotten corner of the world, a message appeared on a device only I could read. It had no sender, no header, just a name, a location, a photograph of a man who had trafficked children through diplomatic immunity. There are no courts for men like him. But there is me. I packed light. Left the dog with Mark. Shut down every digital footprint Lexi had given me. Elliot moved the drive to an air-gapped vault in Iceland, where it would sit like a loaded weapon for as long as I lived. When I passed through airport security under a name that wasn't mine, I looked back once. Not at the country. Not at the skyline. At the idea of who I used to be. Jason Ryder, husband, homeowner, forgotten operative. He died the day his wife looked him in the eye and said it was never personal. Now, there's only the man who finishes what he starts. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I read the message. Just 3 words. He's in Morocco. I smiled. Then I vanished. Again. Life doesn't always fall apart the way you expect it to. Sometimes the person you trust the most is the one holding the match, and when everything you built burns down, you have 2 choices: become the fire or rebuild from the ashes. I lost everything I thought made me human. But in the end, I remembered something more important. No matter how dark the world gets, you still have a choice to stay human, to hold on to your code even when everyone around you breaks theirs. If you've made it this far, thank you. This was just one story. But there are so many more. Stories of ordinary people who went through hell, who were betrayed, tested, and left with nothing, and still found a way to survive. So if this hit you somewhere deep, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like if the story stayed with you, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We tell truths that sound like fiction, and remind each other what we're made of. I'm Jason Ryder. And maybe I'm gone. But someone like me always leaves a message.